Chris Sullivan, president of the industry public relations firm Craft Capital. What do you think experts in the wealth and asset management spaces should be ready for when they do media appearances?
So I would say, well, first off, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. PR 101 trick, always thank your host. I would say they need to be prepared to do a lot of different things and deliver their messages in a lot of different formats. So, for example, I've been doing this for a while, and when I think back to a couple of decades ago, the formats you had to be most prepared for were those what we would call a print interview, where you're on the phone with someone or you're across the table from someone like yourself talking about something that's going on in the news, or you're going on TV where, if you're on for 6 minutes, maybe you were lucky to talk for 45 seconds. Those were the two primary. There were a lot of other things we were doing, but that media type list has expanded so much over the years. So now people need to be prepared not just to be kind of soundbite machines, but really to sit down and be able to go deep into their story, sometimes for an hour plus. If you look at some of the podcasts that people are doing, it is not outside the norm to have a 45-minute to an hour to a 2-hour conversation. So there are a lot of different aspects to that people need to be prepared for and comfortable with before they sit down and start doing those things.
So when people are doing these interviews, it has to be versatile, right? There are different types of mediums, different lengths of conversations. It's very specific, right? So they have to be prepared to address the specific type of media appearance.
Exactly. One of the things that we always try to tell people when we're working with them is make sure you don't lose your message because of the medium. You need to be prepared to tell your story in a number of different ways, being cognizant of the time constraints. But it really is important, and we refer to it as going with an omni-channel approach, because these days your audience is everywhere. There's really no one place asset managers or wealth managers can go to connect with the bulk of the people they want to connect with. Audiences have splintered. You still have to be in your traditional media, but you should be doing digital. You should be looking at YouTube. You should be talking to podcasters. You should be talking to newsletter writers. And each of them are going to have a dramatically different way of doing things. Just because their approach or format might be different doesn't mean your messaging should get muddled. So that's a very important thing that we try to train people on as we're getting them out there in all these different places.
So should the expert in wealth or asset management be prepared to talk about everything from their own business to the performance of financial markets to even geopolitical impact on portfolios, all of that?
I would say it's okay if they have thoughts on all of those things, but you should really know going in, what is this conversation about? What is the point of doing this? We try to make sure everybody before any interview has, call it, three core points that they're planning to get across so that they can make those early in the conversation. They can return to them. They can weave them into the discussion. Over preparing can definitely be a problem for people, and being prepared to talk about anything under the sun. Too often, if you're trying to position yourself as a master of all, you come across as a master of nothing. So there's a real downside to that. So focus is going to be very important.
And the natural extension of that is, should the expert in wealth or asset management be willing to say any and everything in response to a question that's asked, or are there certain things they should maybe keep to themselves?
There are definitely things they should keep to themselves. I think there are things most people should keep to themselves. We seem to be in an era where people aren't very good at doing that anymore. There's an old adage in this business that there's no such thing as bad press, which I can tell you is not true. That is decidedly not the case. So you have to be careful about what you're saying. It's okay to have opinions, but you have to understand, how those opinions might come across to different audiences, how those different opinions might be used. Think of the way that content these days can be sliced and diced. It's problematic sometimes to let too many of your personal views slip through, unless there are cases where that is directly tied to the spokesperson's personal brand. That's a bit of a different story. And, if we had an hour, we could drive into that a little bit more deeply. But I would say generally, as a general rule, keep the personal info to those personal conversations.
And finally, can you tell us a bit about what Craft and Capital has been up to in 2025?
It's been a really exciting year for us. It's been a year of tremendous growth, both on the client side of our business, but also in the team that we've been able to continue to build out. We're not a huge shop, but we started the year with 7 people and now we're at 12. And we've been able to add some really talented folks who bring experience in these types of conversations, either as journalists or as people with years of PR experience who've helped other clients get comfortable with all these different types of media opportunities. So definitely, I feel like a year where we've got great momentum going into what should be a really exciting 2026.
Chris, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.